if Biden, and he has all my prayers and all my hopes, gets those 200 million vaccines out, by the end of the summer, and they're able to achieve that plan, I mean, you're going to watch a recovery happen that is much, much quicker than people are anticipating.
So the question is this: how do most agents find the secrets to succeed in today's competitive real estate market, especially when the top agents are keeping those secrets to themselves? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. Hi, I'm Ari Rastegar, and welcome to Real Estate Rockstars.
Real Estate Rockstars, this is Ari Rastegar. Hey, it is now the end of January. I'm coming back on with Ari Rastegar. So back in end of, I think it was October, right before the election, we came on and we talked about, predictions of what'll happen in the world if Biden's elected, or what'll happen in the world if Trump's elected. And even though it's only been a few months, it feels like the world is starting to change. We're starting to see some really quick kind of transitions. And we wanted to come on, just chat about some 2021 predictions and what we're seeing. Ari, thanks for coming back on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I surely don't have a crystal ball. And I think this pandemic has taught us to stress test our analyses even more for
absolutely
expected. But I agree with you. This is looks like there's a lot of positive things on the horizon, no doubt.
Yeah, a lot of stuff is changing really, really quick. And all weekend, like the funny thing is, like, predictions change all the time. In mid-December, I'm telling people on here, Biden got elected, but the House didn't change hands, so we'll probably see a lot of the same. And then a few weeks later, that actually changed, and so it's like, now I got to eat those words a little bit. So we keep trying to come up with good info. One of the reasons I wanted to have you back on is, like, every other day right now in the Austin Business Journal and all the local Austin papers, they're talking about developments that you guys are doing, new stuff you're buying. And one in particular I thought was pretty cool was about kind of the new way that some of your developments are changing because of COVID. And I thought that would be kind of some fun ways to start with the predictions. So in one of your projects, it kind of said like everything had kind of changed on the future of design with like parking, elevators, things like that. Talk about that for a second. And how long ago did you guys start making those changes?
Yeah. So look, the one project that we have in Austin that we've really, really got granular into this is an office project at East 8th and I-35. Mm-hmm. And I think there was a rendering given in the Statesman, recently. And our head architect, in-house architect, Hunter Floyd, really started to draw that building at the beginning of the pandemic. And so we started to really think from inception for the first time, what will be the future of design? Like, how will this pandemic shape how we work, how we get to work, how we stay in our offices, how residential towers will change, et cetera. And so this building, has staircases on the outside. Mind you, it's a smaller building. It's only about 30,000 feet. But the HEPA filters that we're putting inside of it have UV lights, the open spaces, the windows actually open. That actually creates airflow, which is very unique for office buildings. It sounds, we think of our, windows opening in our houses as a no-brainer, but most office buildings, the windows don't open. And so thinking about those types of things and knowing that we have to take safety and wellness to a whole nother level. Right. And we have a building in Dallas, a 26-story high rise that we designed that will have the largest living wall ever built in North America. But once we kind of saw this pandemic happen, we saw, oh my gosh, like we have to rethink the sizes of the elevators. What's the entrances? What do the exits look like? Where are we going to put the filters? The size of the lobby? Like, you really have to think very, very differently about this pandemic and expecting, something like this could happen again. And if it happens again, or how do you prevent it? And really putting safety and wellness of your tenants at the very top of the totem pole. Whereas before, I don't think developers thought about that as much. It wasn't something that really was at the forefront of everybody's thought process. But East 8th is a testament to, what a post-COVID development will be, having all those mechanisms. So it's pretty exciting. Looking at the silver lining of looking what the innovation that it's bringing, because, to have those types of HEPA filters with UV lighting, viruses, it kills 99.9% of viruses and bacteria from what they say. So, I mean, that's a pretty cool thing, even aside from COVID. Even if someone next to you has a cold or has a flu or touching surfaces, to have that type of safety and wellness is pretty cool. Is a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like all those amenities are, whether COVID had happened or not, they're neat amenities that people would put a value on. I think they'd put a higher value on it now, right? Like the open windows in offices, you're totally right. Being able to get some fresh air when you're a few stories up for a second, like who knew how much that would be a value, right?
No, it's unfathomable. I mean, this whole pandemic, certainly for us is operated in an area of like not knowing, you don't know what you don't know. It's so far in the blind side, but it has created enormous opportunity. I mean, as you mentioned, we've been very active buyers throughout this entire pandemic, seeing really deep value. And I really believe, people are going to come back to the office. I mean, Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan, was talking about how productivity really has plummeted in a lot of ways since people have been working at home. And, I know that you're the father of 4, I'm the father of 3, and managing the Zoom meetings and the school, and, our 8-year-old is, back in school, but it's been a very difficult time. But us as humans, we're very tribal beings, working together, breaking bread together, the brainstorming, whiteboarding. So I'm very much of the belief that, that office is going to have a major recovery, because people want to be at work. They want to be back in that setting. They want to be sitting at home. And I think people really have Zoom fatigue. I mean, even the CEO of Zoom the other day said he's sick of Zoom. I was like, oh my God. I was like, you just paid, however many billions of dollars and you're sick of Zoom meetings. I know I certainly, I'm grateful that we have that technology to bring us together, but I love the human interaction and just being in front of people, talking with them, and being able to share those exchanges.
Yeah. It's like a Zoom is almost as good, but almost only goes so far. And so right now, I'm sure you're having to travel a bunch for a lot of the different things that you're working on, because just seeing somebody in person, just is a little bit different. And I think it's easier to sit with somebody for 3 hours. I went and met with some guys yesterday. It was easier to sit with them for 3 hours, spread out around a table, than it is to have a 3-hour Zoom call. I mean, man, I'm going to the chiropractor way more often right now, because a 3-hour Zoom call is totally going to change it. One of the things the articles talked about was going in an elevator and not even having to use your hands to pick a floor anymore.
Absolutely.
Do you think that technology, what is that technology, and is stuff like that's going to keep getting crazier and crazier? Yeah.
Well, look at Siri as an example. So my 5-year-old, it is unbelievable how good he is with using voice. For YouTube, for texting, for emailing. He utilizes the voice mechanisms that are in all our devices, and we have the Alexas and the Apple devices and those things. And I guess he really taught me how advanced it is. He sends me, he can't read, yet he writes me full text messages. You hear him writing or searching for songs that he likes, or videos that he likes on YouTube. And it's no different when you talk about entering an elevator, because you can use voice. Well, where do you want to go? Where would you like to go, sir? Floor 3. And so it's actually the technology is actually very basic. It's sitting in every one of your smartphones.
Yep, absolutely.
So yes, so pushing a button, and again, until innovation. Real innovation comes from necessity, right? So when you go back to World War II and you look at all the calamity and the horrific stuff of World War II, and put that aside for a moment, the innovation that came out of that era, we're still using so much of that technology because we had no choice.
Yeah.
And so when you look at the stuff of me telling an elevator floor 2, that's so rudimentary. I can have a full conversation with Alexa.
Yeah. Well, I guess, and all that was in every futuristic movie that was supposed to happen 10, 20 years from now. Nobody was touching anything anyway. We don't turn light switches on or off at our house.
By the way,
Alexa does.
That was Star Trek. I mean, just for a second, I mean, we're a little bit older than maybe some of the listeners, but I mean, this is like beam me up Scotty stuff, like literally walking up to the door. They know it's you. I mean, and so I think the future, a lot of these office buildings is that facial recognition of, tenants. If you're on floor 12 or something, you walk up to that elevator instead of having a key card. And I mean, it's just archaic even to have like this wallet with all these credit cards when you have your Apple Pay or you have your key swipe to be able to get into a building, or it should know who I am. Like I walk up, sees my face, it knows what, you're going to floor 3. And, so there's a lot of these predictive mechanisms that are going to come in that are going to eliminate a lot of the touching, which just seems like touching a button in an elevator. It's like, why would I do that? Like, wouldn't I just tell it where I want to go?
Yeah. That is super interesting when you put it like that, because yes, the technology's been here. It's been like that for a while now, and especially in smart homes.
It's like, I mean, it's commonplace technology. So it's just a matter of utilizing what we already have in one industry. And we've seen this over time in other disruptive industries. Like you have one piece of technology disrupting e-commerce, then you go and use that in something like real estate that, still, some of real estate still operates, from the 1800s, it feels like. But how are we going to repurpose that existing technology for something like real estate? So it's not new. It's just being used in a place that hasn't been used.
Yeah, that's where innovation happens. So much innovation has happened this year. So kind of different storyline right now is there's a lot of hotels are getting foreclosed on and sold right now. Like they've had just a horrible year. But over the last couple of months, a lot of cities have been buying up hotels to turn into low income housing or housing for homeless. And I put a thing on my Instagram yesterday, and I had so many listeners send. It was an article in Austin of the city bought 2 hotels, and everybody all over the U.S. sent me the same article from their city, right? So it's happening everywhere, and kind of some redevelopment type stuff. You guys have done a lot of multifamily redevelopment. Have you looked at all at what it would be like to buy a hotel and convert it to low income housing? Do you think there's going to be more of that? Is there money to be made in that?
Yeah, well, look, I certainly, I like what the cities are doing in that regard. And, we're very, very cognizant of that, of affordable housing and those things. From a living standpoint, some of obviously the typical hotels is very small. Okay. Mm-hmm. So having a full service kitchen, but, converting an extended stay type hotel into multifamily has been done several times really, really effectively. But typical hotels, the footprint of a one single unit is really small. So you'd have to knock out the doors and combine some units. You have to add kitchens. So there's definitely a way to do it. And I've looked at a few deals like it before, but it can be pretty expensive. If it's not one of those extended stay, type situations, because when you add the plumbing that goes in and there's a lot more that really goes into it. So I think the ways that the cities are using it make a lot of sense. But, back to, I guess they call it a K-shaped recovery, right? Mm-hmm. It's a fancy way of saying that, different asset classes will recover at different speeds. I'm bullish that hotels will make a comeback. I mean, again, people, especially in industries where you're client facing, right? If you're anything in marketing or sales or interfacing with clients, you're going to have to travel, means airlines are going to come back, means people are going to stay in hotels. And I think that hotels are going to make a serious resurgence, but again, they're going to have to reinvent, how room service works, the cleanliness that goes into the rooms. And I've traveled pretty consistently throughout the pandemic, and watching that change has been pretty incredible. As things as simple as, all the remote controls for TVs are now in little Ziploc bags, or these like little teeny changes that you never really thought about, of these high touch surfaces, and the amount of, kind of desanitization that exists. Yeah. I wash my hands now more than I ever have in my entire life. And it's kind of like I tell my kids, wash your hands, do this, do that. And then I realized, oh my God, like before the pandemic, I feel like I washed my hands like in the shower or maybe another time a day, like gross. Like now I wash my hands 6-7 times a day. Right. And so you're becoming aware of these different things. But I think that real estate in general, I mean, until they can learn to digitize me, there's a place for a lot of this real estate. And I think hotels are definitely going to have their place and definitely have their comeback, but they'll definitely be on the further end out of that recovery. Same with retail. I think retail has really got a bad rap. And if you look at Amazon as an example, obviously, the biggest e-commerce site in the world, their largest acquisition to date of $13.2 billion was Whole Foods.
Yeah.
Rockstar Nation, this is Aaron Amuchastegui with a quick commercial break from our sponsor, Rent Ready. And this one is all about maintenance. Did you know the number one reason that a tenant leaves a rental is lack of response around maintenance? With Rent Ready's brand new 24/7 maintenance service plans, you can have your maintenance managed for you. It also includes emergency services. Rent Ready, the property management app, recently added more support for landlords. Not only can you get hands-off maintenance coordination to troubleshoot your tenant's repairs for you, but you can also streamline your rental property cash flow with increased rental retention rates. With Rent Ready, you can sleep in on the weekends knowing your repairs are handled from start to finish. In addition to making maintenance, you can manage everything else easier too, like collecting rent, listing units, screening tenants, and signing leases, all from the phone in your hand. Get luxury-style maintenance services for your tenants and free weekends for yourself when you sign up for Rent Ready. I want to add a couple things in here too. I had interviewed Ryan Barone, the founder of Rent Ready, in episode 939. So if you want to hear more about Rent Ready and what they've done, go check out that episode with Ryan. And when it comes to maintenance, you guys have heard me say, I have a ton of rental properties. And one of the things I did after owning those for about a year was start to outsource the nighttime calls. There's nothing worse than getting a call at 10 or 11 at night saying my air conditioner's not working, my heater's not working. And it looks like, and I used to have to go to like 10 different companies to do that. One for my rents, one for my property management, one for the repairs. And it looks like Rent Ready is doing all of that in one package. So for this month only, you can still try Rent Ready for 1 year and only for $1 when you use our special code ROCKSTAR. Use code ROCKSTAR and sign up for Rent Ready's annual plan at rentredy.com. That's RENTREDI.com. Use the code ROCKSTAR and you can get Rent Ready for a whole year for just $1.
So when you're the biggest e-commerce site in the world, you just bought a brick and mortar company. The largest acquisition you ever made was brick and mortar. And so people talk about this retail apocalypse. I'm like, well, pretty sure, millennials and Gen Z like to be out of the house. I'm pretty sure they're looking for new experiences. I'm pretty sure that, they don't want to buy everything online, right? So again, these things are going to need reinvention, and there's going to need innovation. Those things are going to need to happen. But I'm looking forward to a pretty powerful comeback for all those asset classes.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, too, it'd be some changing, like the hotels that make it to where you can open up a window now. Like there's certain things that as they adjust, they've talked about taking even the lower end hotels and they can convert them to almost like a, homeless mission, because they can have a cafeteria set up because they don't need kitchens in every room.
I mean, that type of thought process is wonderful. I mean, I really like, that, where that comes from. And I think that's a great way to go about doing it. And look, a lot of these hotels, as you mentioned, were, in foreclosure or just having just a lot of distress, which is kind of a tragedy of itself. But if it turns into something like, and there's a silver lining there where we start having these types of solutions for homelessness and things like that, I think that's a phenomenal way to repurpose that asset.
The foreclosures for commercial investors is totally tragic. Right. I totally like all of the retail, the commercial so much. Like some stuff had been overbuilt and adjusted, but there are plenty of examples where you go, man, that guy did everything he was supposed to do. And it was in the wrong city at that time.
Like a lot of this falls on normal Americans and their 401ks, and people don't look at how far the rabbit hole goes, because a lot of those loans are securitized and sold as bonds to retail investors. So if those start being foreclosed on and those bonds take a hit, a lot of those bonds are in people's 401ks or in their retirement, or owned by public pension funds or by teachers' pension funds. So it's not just, the owner operator that's, getting kicked in the teeth, which sure they are, and the investors are, that are probably in that project, but it goes further down that rabbit hole when that debt is not paid and that debt gets written off, or, that foreclosure happens. Like there's a lot of people that suffer from that. Like the rabbit hole goes much deeper than I think a lot of people are cognizant of.
Yeah. We've got, when we think of like recovery, you talk about different industries, right? Like the real estate side of like residential, single family, multifamily in 9 out of 10 cities, that's stronger than it's ever been.
The stuff outside the urban core, especially in the Sunbelt areas, is just going gangbusters.
It's crazy. It's crazy as we see it. So then the ones that are going to take a little bit longer, you talked about commercial office style stuff, the retail, and then kind of that back end is the hospitality or the travel. Like out in Maui, people are not traveling to Maui like they once were. So that's kind of like the whole state out in Hawaii has, kind of its own thing. So, and maybe downtown New York has its own thing. You think retail comes back before hospitality, like hotels or about the same time, or any idea?
That's a really difficult question. I love that question. Actually, I need to think about it. I think hotels come back first. I mean, if I had to pick one, but I think they're very connected. It'll almost be in tandem, but hotels as a general rule, have to do with travel. Okay. Like people are traveling to this other location, and retail as a general rule is localized. It is localized in a lot of ways. So depending on what that local government is doing, what that local municipality is doing, look, if Biden, and he has all my prayers and all my hopes, gets those 200 million vaccines out, by the end of the summer, and they're able to achieve that plan, I mean, you're going to watch a recovery happen that is much, much quicker than people are anticipating. I think you have to handicap that statement with the mental trauma that people have gone through, which I think is going to take a lot of time, for people to get comfortable again, not wearing their masks or touching hands, being in those. So you have a whole, microcosm of people that even with the vaccines are still going to have, live in that fear state. But the vast majority of people will get back on the road again. There's so much pent up demand. Like, for example, our kids ask us all the time, when are we going to Disneyland? We always go to Disneyland or Disney World once a year. We always, have a little trip. And so people have been waiting and waiting. So once that vaccine hits, I think you're going to see an explosion of travel back to these retail destinations, to the Disney World, the Disneylands, or, the beaches, the vacations, because people are just dying to get out of the house. And, business people are dying to go see their clients and take them out and go to dinners and wanting to have human interaction again. So I think it's going to create a big boom once people feel safe again.
Yeah. My kids talk about Disney and Hawaii almost every day. Like, when do we get to go back to Disney? When do we get to do all these different changes? One of the things you talked about last time was kind of the idea that there's going to be less kind of stuff, but the stuff that's left will be awesome. What I mean by that, there's going to be less restaurants out there succeeding, but the ones left are going to be these amazing experiences. Less stores out there, but like the hands-on toy store with the cool stores. Those are the types of things. Anything to add from that, or things that might have adjusted with that over the last 3 months?
Well, I think that's exactly what that's exactly what it is. And that's going to be, look, and some of that is just capitalism, right? Some of these businesses, some of these restaurants, they shouldn't be there, right? I mean, they just should not be there, and they were just kind of hanging along. And so that's just business and capitalism in some regard. And, but then there's some that obviously have done a lot of things right. But I think it's putting the onus, when you talk about restaurants, to have freaking good food, to have good service, to do something a little bit differently. And those types of restaurants and those types of retail experiences that are truly creating value and really creating some experience that's visceral are going to do remarkably well, I believe. But if it's just going to be your plain Jane, or, walking into some whatever restaurants, just pick up a meal that's just something kind of grab and go, I think that space is going to become hyper competitive. And a lot of those places are not going to come back, and maybe they shouldn't come back, quite frankly. But the restaurants that have great food and stuff will do great.
Yeah. I mean, even before COVID, most businesses fail. Most restaurants fail eventually, right? Like,
there's like 5%, by the way. It's like a ridiculous number.
Yeah. Like, being an entrepreneur, as entrepreneurs, we almost have a sickness, right? When people say, like, that's not for everybody, because being able to be okay with the ups and downs, or see the challenge and have it be exciting instead of, depressing. But yeah, even before this, 95% of new businesses failed. Maybe that's amplified, some of that. And, but I think we get excited for, the people left stepping up their game, the experiences being better as people get back to them. One of the last, we've only got a few more minutes, but another thing that's happening right now, there's so much talk in eviction moratoriums, which we are starting to see that happen more than it was a few months ago. So 6 months ago, we were like 100% occupied on 300 units, 100% collection rate. Only a few people were behind. Right now, we're probably 20-ish people that should be in eviction, right? Somebody hasn't paid us in 9 months for a $2,000 a month place. And I think that's going to be, it looks like right now, those eviction moratoriums are going to keep getting extended to like September. And one of the things the government's doing to offset that is there is stimulus that's going to pay like 2/3 of the back rent. I think it's something like $75 billion in rent is owed right now. And there's $50 billion from the stimulus going toward back rent. And we're trying to get very avid of like helping residents know, like, hey, we know you're behind but here's where to go. You have a lot of, property too. You've got a lot of rental properties all over the place. How are you feeling about that? What are you thinking about that? Are you strategically doing anything different? Are you building in more of an occupancy factor? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do think that there's a very high likelihood of extending some of those. Mm-hmm. And I think that, some people are really suffering and they're not able to kind of make those payments. And you can tell the difference. When you communicate with them, you can see the person that is communicating back and, maybe lost their job or is going through some sort of struggle or something. And, working with them, working out payment plans. We've been very fortunate that, in the high 90s of our collections have remained pretty stable in that regard. But you can kind of see where some people are kind of gaming the system a little bit, maybe using it a little bit to their advantage. And yeah, I guess you see that in any industry or in any situation where someone can find some kind of angle, right? And, we'll let karma kind of deal with those kind of folks and, they'll figure it out. But I think normality is much closer, or the new normal, so to speak, or the new status quo is closer than we think. And so, again, going back to these vaccines, well, what's the excuse going to be if you have 200 million people vaccinated and, cities have been opened up, people are going back to work? I don't know what the basis would be to extend that, that beyond a certain date if we're nearing the end of this, right? So I'm hopeful that that the Biden administration is very successful in what their goals are. It's ambitious, but I like that. I like that level of ambition because it's for the right cause and for the right reasons. But I'm inclined to agree with you that eviction moratorium could be extended. And look, again, I think people, once they feel comfortable or they're able to go back to work, they want to go back to work. And I think that's the vast majority of people. I think people want to be at work. They want to get back to a normal life, but there are going to be some stragglers that, game the system as long as they possibly can. But in our experience, it's definitely been the vast minority, on a unit by unit basis that haven't been able to pay completely or tried to try to hang along, longer than they're welcome.
Yeah. It's a great point that actually it's really easy during rough times to see the negative too, like to start to see like, oh, it's there. But remembering, yes, the vast majority of our residents are doing great. Right. Yeah. And the vast majority of people do want to go back. And, it's just now starting to tick up enough where we're like, we got to start keeping our eye on this a little bit. But maybe that's why they're talking about September, because if by end of summer, they're wanting to have everyone that wants a vaccination is going to have a vaccination. Well, then maybe that timing will get there. So one last question. So parking was like a future design type thing where right now, I think commercial and retail are allowing less parking for new developments because they're saying, hey, now buildings are going to be kind of 50% occupied. Like people are going to take turns coming to the office or work, have at home, things like that. Do you think that that's going to catch somebody later? Or do you think that they're like, if worse comes to worse, cities will just build new? Do you think that's a really long term, like a 10 to 15 year, we're going to need less parking?
Look, I definitely think on the long term, parking requirements will decrease. Yes.
Okay.
I think it's much longer than people think it is.
Yeah.
Parking, we're a driving culture, especially here in the United States, just by nature, and having our own cars, having that autonomy to control kind of where we're going, even with the advent of, the Ubers and the Lyfts and the things of that nature, people want to still kind of maintain that level of control. So I don't really see, again, on the on the 2030 year, yes, I think parking requirements are going to decrease dramatically. But over the next 10 to 15 years, I don't see, the city certainly really lessening those parking requirements to the degree that, maybe I don't want to say the degree that they should, because a lot of these parking lots, they don't have as many people, in them. Like if you look at the parking requirements in some cities, they're just outrageous. I mean, you look at the parking lots and they're 30%, 40% vacant. So there is a need for parking, but it's a very difficult balancing act. So if you go long term, yes, the parking is going to decrease, but these statutes have long been standing. There's a lot of people on these councils that, don't see that future coming, certainly maybe not even in their lifetimes. A lot of these individuals are in are baby boomers. And so they're not seeing, that writing on the wall. So I'm a little bit bearish, unfortunately, that those parking requirements are going to change in favor of less parking as much as developers think that they should.
Yeah. And developing in Santa Barbara, that was always the toughest part. You'd have this lot and you're like, I could put 9 condos on that. And you're like, no, I could put 4 because of the parking.
That's insane.
Yeah. Even back in January and February, they started to say, well, with self-driving cars and with Uber and stuff like that, cities are going to start requiring some less parking. Maybe the pandemic type stuff allows that shift a little faster, but we will see. But Ari, I know you've got a busy day. I appreciate you coming on to get to talk about kind of this week's state of the market update. If people want to follow more of kind of your advice or your tips or things you're doing, how should they go find out more?
Yeah, they can go to rastegarproperty.com, or they can, follow me on Instagram at @Rastegar. It's pretty easy to find me if they're looking, but we're definitely going to be very, very active in the market for the coming years, and really see this pandemic as a huge opportunity. I mean, just unbelievable generational opportunity. And so, yeah, absolutely, it's pretty easy to find me if you're looking.
Awesome. Ari, thanks for joining me, Real Estate Rockstars. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me, buddy. Talk to you later.
Bye.
All right, Real Estate Rockstars. This is Aaron Muchastegi jumping in again to thank you for listening to the show. Hopefully you guys loved listening to that one. And I want to make sure that you know about all of the extra resources that we have. And also, we need your help. They say podcasts are free. You get to listen to podcasts for free. But what is the cost of that podcast? I would say if I could beg you to pay anything for that podcast, I would say the cost of the podcast is going and giving a review. So whether you download it on Google or Apple or YouTube or anywhere else, please go give us a review. Say what you liked, what you didn't like. It helps us get better guests. The more reviews, the higher we get in the rankings. Right now, we are the biggest podcast out there for real estate agents, and we want to keep that spot because we know there's lots of podcasts out there. So go give us a review. Also, be sure to go to hibandigital.com. If you liked any of the resources that those real estate agents talked about, we've got a huge video vault of those resources for free. Every penny that comes on the podcast that we interview, they give us something that helps them get their deals or helps them work with their clients. And we put that in the toolbox in our vault for you. So go to hibandigital.com and you can get it. If you're looking for real estate education, go to rebusuniversity.com. We have all sorts of courses in there to help agents succeed in real estate, how to get the listing, how to negotiate deals, how to become an investor, all sorts of different stuff, rebusuniversity.com. And if you want to chat with me, go find me on Instagram. And if you come find me on Instagram, you can send me messages. Tell me what you want to hear. Tell me what you liked, what you didn't like. We try to put a bunch of content out there too. You can find me in 2 different places. It's at rerockstars.com for our Real Estate Rockstars page, or at aaronandmuchastegi.com for my personal Instagram page, where I can chat with you about all sorts of different things. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again soon.